really, really want to know, and I guess this is more so to the men, but ladies, feel free to chime in as well. But courtship, two-part question. Number one, is that a thing of the past? And my second part of the question, if it's not, men, like, what would it take for you to court someone? Is there something that you would do or even consider? Like, I need to know.
Gotcha.
Okay, so courting is still a thing. Courting is very much alive. It's just unfortunately we have a plethora of women who fail on the first date. They just don't know it because a lot of men who have upward movability, they don't discuss whether you failed the past. They just don't call you no more. Or hang in there until they get them draws and then they out.
Yeah.
I would chime in
Vaughn,
and
what you think
that,
about that? Oh, go ahead, Lindsay. Sorry.
Oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry. Oh, okay.
Just
Go
like
ahead.
the initial going into like some sort of dating, the idea of, a first date is lacking. Like having a conversation on a phone is lacking. Asking those intentional questions other than like, oh, let's hang out, or I don't know. It's really just very informal, versus let's be intentional about like having specific conversations when we go on a date and like a couple of dates and have some sort of standards. Like, and I'm not saying it's that thought of a men too, but like what happened to this list of like what restaurants people like wouldn't go to on a first date? What would qualify as, a reasonable place to go? For me, I'm like, I can go on a walk and ask these questions. I don't need a bunch of pressure, but like I do want to spend one-on-one time with someone and like me be able to have conversations where future isn't frowned upon. Like there's all this pressure of like, where are we going? The woman wants marriage, so on and so forth. And like, I know a lot of men like tuck tail and run like, oh, that's not what I want. I don't look at it personally as a me issue. I look at it as like, they're not in the same mindset as me, as like what I'm wanting for my future. So I don't bother with it. But I feel like some women kind of internalize that and then go back to like what's easy, what gets them attention, which is sex and is the sexualization of themselves to like make themselves feel a little bit better. Because standing in that place where you're holding those boundaries and holding that structure of what you want is not an easy place, especially if it is hard to find a person
Yeah.
that has the same type of intentions that you do. Um, so I feel like courtship has kind of like fallen off. Like it's difficult. Like guys are like, what is the purpose of this if it's not going to get me the end result that I want? Versus let me really find the values and more about this person and see if this is someone that I can actually spend my time with and want to spend my time with and build something with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I
So
know I was
that
doing
that poses the
research.
question.
I was doing
Oh, go ahead.
research
Go ahead.
last night, and then I stumbled across the introduction of dating. And dating, I think it was introduced with 1900s, I believe. I wish I had the
Right.
data in front of me, but it has replaced courtship because there was no such thing as dating at one point,
Right.
right? It was simply the person to whom you were speaking to. That particular person was courting you, and in the process they were courting you, they had to be over that particular woman's parents' home where they would cross-examine the man. So this dating concept is relatively new in comparison to historically speaking in terms of courtship,
Right.
right? And then I
I
did
think
and even in my study, it was interesting. The term dating came from where a man was rejected by a woman, and she said that she has a lot of men on her calendar in terms of her dates are filled. So that's where dating comes from. In other words, she was tied up with other men that were scheduled on her calendar. So that's where dating comes from.
That's
Mm.
interesting.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
wanted
I
to
think
throw
as we
in there.
move from like the culture, like as the culture shifts, it's like we're moving further and further away from what the original things that were successful. We're moving far away from it, and then we're not seeing those, and it's kind of weird because I'm like, okay, you saw what worked before. Why are we moving away from it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
family.
I
Because the
would
basis of when we had family, there was these things called social buffers,
Yeah.
where in terms of dating, like no, excuse me, courtship, shaming, culture, morality. The
Yeah.
lack of these social buffers is the reason why we're at where we're at. And like I said before, I said there's no way that we're going to do better collectively as a community if we're not
Mm,
doing if we're not coherently doing well as a family, right? Because
mm,
Right.
a community can only rise as high as its family.
mm.
So Vine or Mason, y'all have any thoughts on that one?
Um,
Yeah.
my
I do.
let me hop on there real quick. My idea, because I'm just falling back listening, and I think that it's super important to look for quality in your mate. And I don't think a lot of people look for quality nowadays. The brother spoke about courtship, but you have to understand that at that particular time, those things were set up for means of survival too as well. And families did stay together a lot longer. However, they stayed together because they really had no other options or situations to go to. There's been a lot of different social programs and a lot of things that have been put in place over time to really split up the family. So that does come into play. So there's a lot of different services and things of that nature to where now they could provide those things to women, say hypothetically, and then now they don't necessarily have to be in situations where they're not emotionally bonded to the individual. Back when courtship was the biggest thing, it had really nothing to do with whether or not we like each other. It had to do with the fact that I was able to provide for the family, and I could take you out of your household, and I could take the burden off of your parents that were raising you. And then if you were in a situation that you necessarily didn't really want to be in, right, you still had to stay there because you had no other means. But as certain things have come into place over time, particularly over the 1900s, and then providing more services, and it's a good thing, right? Because now you don't necessarily have to be in situations you don't want to be in. These things also work retroactively against the family and household because now you could say, listen, I don't want to deal with this individual, or you know what, I'm independent. I don't need a man in my life, and all of these different types of issues. And these things work towards splitting up the family. But one more thing I just want to touch on, and that again, when we speak about um, the quality versus the quantity, I think that people getting to know each other, that still exists out there. But I think that a lot of us, the reason that situations don't work is because we look for people that's not necessarily our match, and they're not really in our league. Females have men that are out of their league that they go for, and men have women that are out of their league that they go for. A woman might go for a man just because he has a nice haircut, he dresses nice, and then she doesn't understand why, or he has a nice chain and she doesn't understand why that situation didn't work out. Your perfect match might be a dude that's bald headed, 3-inch meats, and he got a basic job. That might be your perfect match.
Yeah.
What about that one
And
now?
and
Yeah, I
What
and
just
and,
about
want
and,
that
and,
one?
and he might
I,
make you more happy than anything in the world.
yeah, I would just want to say in terms of
Okay.
some of the things that you said, I agree with some of the things that you said. In terms of quality, you suggest they should go out there and look for quality. This is why court families were very imperative, because the families would make sure that this particular man aligned with cultural values, family values, and even religious dispositions, rather than people out on a dating market simply looking for their match. It was more so having someone who matches with your family orientated values. That's what was pushing families and cultures forward, not simply individualistically who matches with me. It was who predominantly matched with our family values.
So I
I'm
have a
gonna.
couple things to say. Going back onto like how things have changed culturally over time, right? Like way back when things happened younger, right? You had people courting you, you had arrangements happening like prior to you leaving your home. Now you have women and men leaving their homes, going to college, educating themselves, getting a job, and really having a different set of values. And then going into what Guru said, like I wouldn't say necessarily my family or some people's families don't have the values that I would want to continue on. So you do it by yourself, right? In order to correct certain things that you don't want to have in your family and like your kids moving forward. Um, I think at the end of the day, like we do have a big culture shift, but we have to recognize that, educating ourselves is important. Um, Knowing what we want out of life is important, but we have to understand ourselves like the most, right? I have to be able to figure out who my match is by understanding myself as a person. There's things that we go through and like life changes that help us figure those things out. And a lot of people really don't like to be reflective of themselves as a person and figuring out what their core values are, what they want to instill in their family moving forward. So I think that the cultural change can be good. We just have to use it the right way,
I don't think
if that
it's
makes
good.
sense.
The reason why, no, it doesn't make sense, because the reason why I don't think it's good is because primarily as African Americans, we have lost a sense of culture. So to be moving in the opposite direction, we notice the ramifications and consequences of moving in the opposite direction of our culture. We've lost a sense of identity. So this idea of it may be good, obviously it's not. It's
The
not a
thing
good
is,
Well,
thing.
I mean, this
but
might be a nice question, but how can culture not be found? Like, why can't it be talked about and continued moving
even
forward?
even though there's a culture shift, you got to also keep in mind that if you're seeing things that's not working for the culture as it shifts, and you're still doing it rather than sticking with what worked, that's a problem.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Chill.
I agree. Go ahead,
All
Chip.
right. So I was simply going to say this. Look, I look at culture just like I look at nature, and nature always fixes itself. It always. And just like, what I'm saying, what's going on right now with the whole dating market, it will correct itself, and it will correct itself with the younger generation because they will too see what their mothers had or their grandmothers had and be like, oh no, I don't want that life. I don't want that strong, independent life. Y'all can have that shit. I'm going to do things different. It's going to correct itself. Now, I hear the conversations of, a lot of different women, and I'm not going to say all of y'all or even y'all on the panel, but there are a lot of women who made a lot of mistakes, and now they're looking to get a guy over a barrel. You know what I'm saying? They're coming with the language. You know what I'm saying? They're saying certain words, saying, "I'm ready for marriage. I'm ready for this and that," but yet they spent 20 years of their lives laying up with a pookie. But yet now they want a dude who done made himself, what I'm saying, at the top, the best version of himself that he possibly can. They want him to come in and clean up the mess. Yeah, nah, that ain't gonna happen. It's just not.
I mean,
It,
cleaning up
it's
somebody else's mess, definitely not. But I mean, I don't think we should like. Everybody makes mistakes. You know what I'm saying? Everybody gets fooled at some
hmm
point. Everybody becomes the fool at some point. And
yeah,
in order to be the master, sometimes you have to be the fool. So if somebody is laying up with a pookie for 20 years, they really 20 years is a long time. But if that's how long it
yeah.
took them to learn and to try to be a better person and turn their life around, I don't think anybody should like not want to shoot for the stars at that time. Not
You got to
saying you
be
can,
real. You got to be realistic though. So you could
yeah,
shoot for the
hmm
stars, and you could say, okay, well, this is what I want, and you have all the rights to have the imagination that you want to have. But if you're not
yeah,
realistic within your expectations or where you stand,
Yeah.
then the likelihood is that you'll be lonely forever because you're still up here shooting for something that you can't obtain. Because
Right. Like
what you're shooting at don't want you.
I use Miranda, right, for an example. I watch your videos. You seem feminine. You seem to have all of these great qualities and attributes about yourself as a woman, which is very commendable. But if a guy is in a basement smoking weed and he's not doing anything for himself and he's shooting for you, yeah, he's shooting for the
yeah,
stars, but it's very unrealistic because a feminine traditional woman like yourself is not going to necessarily deal with a man that's incompetent and who doesn't
yeah,
want to be a capable man. So it's
yeah,
a conceptually, I guess that's a great thing, but practically, nah. I don't think you're as
yeah.
attainable, man. Yeah.
Mason, what's your thoughts on this, Mason?
Um, I agree that. Well, I agree with a lot of the points that have been made. I feel like going back to like the video where the woman posed the question, why does it seem men prefer to make baby mamas before wives? I don't think that's a preference. I think that uh, I started laughing after the video played because like the next guy started to say exactly what I think, which is people be fucking, and it happens sometimes. So
Yeah,
sometimes people get pregnant, you know what I mean, and it happens, and I don't necessarily think that that's a preference per se. I definitely think that it's a reflective of where society is. I agree with Guru, with Divine Allah, as far as the deterioration of the family, particularly the black family, um, has definitely contributed to why the dating pool currently has piss in it. I like to say. I also dated the way that I dated, largely because I had children young. So when I dated, um, I kind of had more long term qualities in mind when I was selecting a mate because I recognized that a few things. One, having grown up the way that I did with divorced parents and stuff like that, like you just really don't want to recreate the same dynamic. So I always wanted to be like a husband and a father or whatever. And so realizing that when you marry somebody, you marry their family. It was very important to me that the values matched up and everything. So like I definitely think that we got to get back to dating for the things that really matter instead of dating for whatever we be seeing on these memes, and Nash Jordan
Yeah.
and shit like that. So like we really gotta men and women alike, but I definitely think that the responsibility, especially for procreation, ultimately rests on the female's shoulders, on the woman's shoulders, because again, you hold the life. We create the spark,
Yeah.
but you hold the life, you
Right.
know, and really in 2024, like you're not getting pregnant unless you want to or you're extremely negligent. So
Yeah.
being that you're the gatekeeper of your womb, you got to be responsible with who you select to allow access to that. You know what I mean? But I also feel like the term a village, it takes a village to raise a child and all that. I
Yeah.
think that going back to the lack of family structure, the lack of men in the house, all that stuff that Guru was talking about, that Divine Allah had alluded to, like if we were more if there was more of a family presence, then y'all would kind of have the weaponry to be able to better choose suitors. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And there's a lot of that's a big ass if though. You know what I mean? That literally requires us to go back in time. So, dealing with Guru, you were about to say something. What were you about to
No,
say?
I should finish your thought.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I definitely think that it requires us to go back in time. So at least to think of it that idealistically. So I think we like okay, we're dealing with a broken system that we've already identified as broken. How do we pick up the pieces and then move forward? Like just justified kind of mentioned. Like once we recognize that there's an issue, it's our responsibility to now change it. But again, it's a really big societal thing that is bigger than just the black community, bigger than any one family, one person, whatever. So that's part of the reason I've been so quiet.
Yeah, one
Mhm.
thing I like about I'm So Chill is because let's say such men do exist. Let's say such men exist and their preference is to impregnate women. And you're right, predominantly the onus is on the woman. But my thing is the reason why I like I'm So Chill a lot is because he's willing to ostracize these men and shame these men. And in order for us to move forward, or in order for us to move forward, we're going to have to shame and cut these people off who are behaving like degenerates. So it's very true. Yes, it's predominantly on the woman. She's the gatekeeper. But moreover, are we willing to shame such people who behave in degenerate behavior and cut them off? You have to deal with cancer aggressively. So,
Yeah.
I think
So
that's
that that
I
that
agree.
brings up a
But
that brings up a question, right? You have the men that will sleep with anything, and we all know, like most men will have sex with, as just justified said, will have sex with almost anything walking. The likelihood, but there's a difference between a man that will lie and almost manipulate people to having sex. That's another thing. So I do understand those men need to be shamed. But I
Mhm.
do know that if men in general go to a woman, say, hey, listen, I want sex from you, the woman agrees, yes, it's up to the woman to truly protect her womb at that point because you're the one that is going to bring in the next generation of bad behavior from different men if it's not taught the right way, if there's no proper male leadership, if there's no guidance, if none of
Yeah.
that's involved. So that's why I'd
And
say it's really important for the woman to protect her womb.
But
Yeah,
then also when he
It's
said
not breaking.
degenerates, like to shame the degenerates, I was taking it as even both sides. If you really think about it,
Yes.
like, a
Mhm.
woman
Yeah.
needs to, like if you see this woman just
Yes.
shaking her behind, half naked all the time, and all that, and we're just like, girl, go do you, girl, do whatever the situation is. You know how this culture is doing lately. That's what needs to be talked about, like on either side when you see degenerates. It like
That's why
I
I left.
agree with you.